Welcome to the new monthly news review. My name is Tam Pledger. I'm a digital portfolio manager here. Lots of content to get through over the past month. This session aims to wrap up some of those key themes that we've been observing across DCD. So each month you'll be joined by members of DCD's editorial team to discuss some of the stories that we've seen, some of the trending topics, and some of the reporting observations from across our industry. Quick rundown of some of the topics that you can expect today. We've got Google's new AI cloud launch, got memory shortages and AI infrastructure. We've got OCP and Huawei updates, and some of the upcoming magazine features with a little bit of a sneak peek on US ratepayer. So, for this episode, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Matthew Gooding, Senior Editor, Georgie Butler, Cloud and Hybrid Editor, and Zach Skidmore, Energy and Sustainability Editor. So, to each of you, let's just start with what you've been seeing across the industry, which articles you've been working on and released over the last month. Zach, let's start with you on this one. Kind of from that energy and sustainability perspective, what have you been seeing over the last month?
Sure. So I think initially it would be good to start with probably the biggest deal in the sector, which was NextEra Energy acquiring Dominion Energy in a deal worth around 67 billion. So as you can imagine, a massive deal, but the implications for the data center sector are quite significant, given the fact that Dominion Energy is the major utility for Virginia and the Northern Virginia area, which, as we all know, is kind of the highest concentration of data centers in the world, actually. I was about to say in the country, but in the world. So it's a very interesting deal, not only just because of its scale, because of its potential implications. And if we're looking at kind of the backlog of data center load between both companies' pipelines, it's exceeding upwards of 130 gigawatts. Of course, all of that isn't going to come to bear, as we know when data centers are seeking a connection to utilities. Some fall off, some are speculative applications. But it will be really interesting to see how such a large company kind of handles all this load. And also we have to pay heed to the fact that there's a little bit of kind of regulatory hurdles that this deal has to overcome. I mean, it must be approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Virginia State Corporation Commission, amongst other state commissions such as North Carolina, for example. I think more generally, it's kind of a nice snapshot into how utilities more almost consolidating their position within the American market. I think, from my understanding, NextEra has been trying to acquire kind of facilities across their coverage area, and this one is just a real kind of hammer down on their intentions to be basically the biggest utility within the country. And if this deal does go through, it will become the largest regulatory utility in the world. So it'll be very interesting to firstly see if the deal actually does get approved. I'm assuming it will, but we'll have to see. And then looking down the line, how it's going to cope with so much load coming onto its pipeline, and whether it will have kind of the wherewithal to handle it. As I'll go into later with my ratepayer piece, it's just very interesting to see how utilities are responding to all this projected data center load. So it will be interesting to see what happens. The second piece, or kind of area that I wanted to talk a little bit about, was carbon removal. It was big in the news a couple of months ago that Microsoft, or reports emerged that Microsoft was pausing its carbon removal purchasing, which they subsequently pushed back on, with the company stating that this perceived pause was in fact an adjustment to the pace and volume of its carbon removal procurement. This is a statement from its chief sustainability officer, who stated, "As we continue to refine our approach to sustainability goals," and that created quite an uproar, given the fact that Microsoft is the biggest corporate purchaser of carbon removal credits by a real long way. I believe that they've purchased more than 45 million tons of carbon removal, with its next closest challenger, Frontier, which is a carbon buying consortium, which includes the likes of Meta and Google, only purchasing 1.8 million tons. So as you can imagine, they're basically propping up the entire carbon removal sector. And the reports that they were pausing it caused a lot of uproar. They subsequently revised it, saying that they would, as I said, adjust the pace of volume. And this month they came out with the latest carbon removal purchase, which was with BioCirc in Denmark, and they agreed to purchase 650,000 tons of carbon removal. So it's interesting to see how this kind of, I think it was a bit of a marketing fail on
Quite a
their
lot.
part, and it subsequently, yeah, it was very,
So
very
we've got
interesting. And then there's
carbon. Yeah, so carbon removals potentially back. We're seeing big movement on some of those that wider utility piece there. Georgia, from your side, what have you seen across the industry? Again, big announcement from your side.
So from the kind of cloud perspective, definitely for me anyway, the thing that's been most interesting was Google's announcement that they are launching effectively their own neo cloud that's separate from Google Cloud in partnership with Blackstone. Blackstone has obviously been quite a big backer of all of these companies at various points of the industry for a long time. So they've wanted to get involved in it, but I think it's more interesting from Google's perspective. Obviously, Google has been known for its kind of custom chips, its TPUs, but typically it's only offered them via its own Google Cloud platform. But it seems to be kind of trying to step out on this a little bit. They've been talking about maybe selling them to a select few customers, but they didn't say which select few customers naturally. And it kind of, I guess it's almost like a repositioning of their chips unit as a sort of separate business. And I think what really that says to me anyway is that the cost benefit analysis of having these proprietary chips and only offering access to them via their cloud platform is no longer as valuable as selling them. And that's because I think it's kind of a comment on the memory supply shortage, chip prices rising. They have obviously become valuable enough that it's actually worth more money at this point to sell them to other people to use on their own will. And it's interesting, and it's something that we're kind of seeing as well with Amazon. Amazon has been kind of toying with that as well with its Trainium chips too. So I don't know if that's going to continue. It's definitely interesting. They're kind of positioning themselves as like a bit more of a competitor to Nvidia in a slightly more direct way, I guess, is what I would say. From the point of view with Blackstone as well, obviously, building out cloud platforms is very, very capital intensive. And all of the cloud providers they're laying off tens of thousands of people. They're racking up so much debt. We're going through a period of just kind of crazy money decisions, honestly. And I think this was sort of for them a way of expanding their offering, increasing their capacity, but actually without taking the debt on themselves. It's not on their shoulders. Blackstone is investing in it, and it's kind of like a separate business, so they don't have to worry about massively adding to their own debt pile or spend pile, but still able to sell and make money from it. So it makes complete sense, but it's definitely an interesting shift from kind of the traditional business model that they've been using up to this point.
Yeah, what sort of impact do you think that will have on the market going forward?
Honestly, it's really, really hard to say. I think all of the hyperscalers are definitely, they're hoping that their chips are going to become serious competitors with Nvidia's GPUs. I think that's where they're kind of going with this. It's also just, it's a comment on just the sheer amount of money that is being actually spent. I don't know what the impact will be, but I think that this is something that maybe we're going to increasingly see, because there is a finite pile of money, right, that can be used to build out all of these data centers, to buy all this hardware. And it feels like every time that we write about it, it gets kind of crazier and more scary, and the number keeps getting bigger. And at some point, it's just, there just isn't more. So I think it's kind of just a reflection on people trying to find new inventive ways to get around that problem.
Yeah, speaking of money matters, Matt, I know that you're working on IPO Summer at the moment.
Oh yeah, IPO Summer is just getting underway. Very exciting for tech nerds and finance bros and stuff, I would imagine. But the big one is the SpaceX IPO. It's probably one of the biggest stories in tech at the moment, and certainly very relevant to the topics we cover. That's going to be by the looks of things, on Friday, June the 12th. And one of the stories that I worked on this month was looking at the SpaceX IPO prospectus, which came out a couple of weeks ago. It is extremely long, is extremely repetitive. I was going through it, and I think I came across the same page, which had literally been copied and pasted at least 10 or 12 times, I would say. It was very, very weird. But there was some good stuff in there, some interesting stuff, which kind of lifted the lid on Elon Musk's empire. Elon Musk, as we know, richest man in the world, the owner of SpaceX and various other companies now attached to SpaceX, like XAI, his AI company, which operates data centers in the US. So I think what we saw in there was a couple of things, probably to Georgia's point about Google trying to find uses for their chips. XAI had bought a lot of GPUs and is now renting some of them out to Anthropic, another AI company, which is nominally one of its competitors, which is quite an interesting shift because it basically means XAI, a company that was meant to be an end user for GPUs, is now effectively a cloud provider to one of its competitors. It is getting paid $1.25 billion a month for the
I couldn't
privilege of
believe
renting out.
that bill. That bill is madness, isn't it?
Well, but it's sort of typically Muskian because if you look at it, it says either party can cancel the contract at 3 months' notice. So it is 1.25 billion a month, but nobody's really tied to it. So it looks good for their share price when they debut on the stock market, but really doesn't mean that much.
Still, 3 months
I think
is still 3.75
that is still quite a lot of money,
isn't it? That's still it's chunky.
Yeah, it's a decent amount. Yeah, I would concede, but I think it's interesting, like what you were saying with Google looking for ways to recoup these investments. Clearly, this is what Musk and SpaceX are trying to do as well. I think the other interesting thing to note from the IPO filing was there's been a lot of ambiguity about how much data center space Musk has actually built. He's got 3 data centers in Memphis. He says that is the largest AI training cluster in the world. He says there is 1 gigawatt of data center space there. If you look at the IPO filing, it details how much compute XAI has, and the way it words it is very very specific. It says this is capacity that we have available to us. So we have bought 1 gigawatts worth of GPUs, but there is no figure saying how many of those GPUs are electrified. In fact, the only reference that they make to capacity which is online comes to about 300 megawatts, which is I'd say lines up with what people who have studied sort of photos of the site would say, because they have looked at photos and said there is only enough cooling capacity here for about 300 megawatts. So it seems like Musk is probably exaggerating when it comes to the size of his data centers, unsurprisingly. So that was quite an interesting snippet from the IPO filing. So we're going to have that next week. Anthropic have also announced that they're going to IPO later this year. We don't have any details of that yet because their filing is confidential. But so I'm sure once that comes out, it will be interesting to see what's going on behind the scenes there. And I guess the question that raises is, what are OpenAI going to do? Because it's long been mooted that they will IPO as well. They have not set a date yet or put any sort of any kind of timescale on when this might happen. They just keep talking about it sort of quite vaguely. And as Georgia was saying earlier, there's only a finite amount of money out there. Like, these are enormous sums of money, but if people are buying shares in SpaceX and buying shares in Anthropic, you kind of wonder what's going to be left behind for OpenAI, especially when Google is also seeking to raise $80 billion to fund its own data center plans. So lots to get into in the finance side, and I'm sure hopefully it will become a bit clearer in the next few months.
So big movers and shakers on the money side. Potentially, is carbon removal back? Question mark as in there, and IPO summer, it seems. But I know that both yourself, Matt, and Georgia, you've been on the ground at a few events recently. Let's just touch base on what you've seen, what you heard. What's the industry saying at the moment? Georgia, I know you were at Huawei recently. What can you share from your experience there?
Most importantly, Huawei had an adorable robot that was a panda that was kind of crawling around the floor. That was excellent, and I was a big fan of that. But in terms of what they were actually talking about, yeah, I did find it actually quite interesting because we cover like earnings calls and stuff a lot at DCD, and obviously for me, I'm covering the cloud providers' earnings calls, and a kind of repeat sentiment that's been coming up throughout them has been that the memory chip shortage driving up prices has actually led to customers increasingly moving to the cloud, and that's been something like I've been hearing that from like the US hyperscalers, from the Chinese ones as well. They've been saying it. Smaller cloud companies have also been talking about how they're kind of cashing in on this, the very fact that like just by sheer economies of scale, they have greater access to servers and storage and stuff like that. And it means that customers are kind of coming to them. And the Huawei event was sort of targeting the complete opposite of that. They were releasing and announcing their new AI infrastructure stack. And it's basically targeting enterprises that want to put it in either like their own on-prem data center or in co-location data centers. And it's about them being able to have their own, their whole AI infrastructure all to themselves and not having to go to the cloud at all. So, I mean, given the kind of context that I was going into this, I was a little bit. I was questioning really like how much demand is there actually for this at the moment, because presumably the prices are going to be pretty high. Obviously, anyone who's watching this, if you go to tech conferences, they don't typically put the actual prices up on the screen during the keynotes, so I can't comment exactly on that. But I will say during the media roundtable afterwards, their representative that they put forward was talking about how financially this is kind of benefiting Huawei quite a lot at the moment. I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit, but he was effectively saying, the GPU guys had their time when they were getting to rake in all the money, and now it's the storage guys, and they're cashing in on it as hard as they can, and they're loving every second. He also kind of like his argument was, yes, there's a lot of migration to the cloud with this in mind, but also that there's kind of key verticals that are still very focused on prem, will continue to be focused on prem and don't want to miss out, and they're willing to pay the money to do this. So I think a big one that he mentioned was kind of like banking and stuff like that. So which it makes sense. You can understand that. But yeah, it was definitely just interesting to see such a different perspective on an issue compared to what I was hearing from everyone else. Yeah, and Huawei seemed very happy, so I'm happy for them.
Okay, lots of insight there from the media roundtable at Huawei. Matt, you've been at the OCP event. What have you seen on the ground?
Yeah, I was in Barcelona. No pandas, unfortunately. Although they did have some robots for like, putting data centers together, putting servers into racks.
It's not the same. It's just not the same.
It did not have the same cuteness value. It was like it looked like a big Jenga robot trying to put these fake servers into a rack. I kind of liked it. I think the sort of the main themes that I took away from it were around two of my favorite topics, power and cooling. There was a lot of talk about liquid cooling and a lot of specifications coming out for liquid cooling and ways to connect these systems together, basically, to ensure that they all work harmoniously and people can have heterogeneous cooling systems which incorporate lots of different things from different vendors. So I thought that was quite interesting. I think if you like cooling, get ready for a lot more cooling, because there's going to be a lot more news coming out over the next few months, and I think that's going to continue to be a real big topic in the industry. The other sort of recurring theme which came up in a few panels was around power to the data center and whether you can get direct current into the data center, because at the moment you convert the power outside the data center and send it in as alternating current, whereas if you can get direct current straight in, then you can potentially have much more powerful racks, much more powerful chips, and much more efficient data centers, basically. So they were talking about various ways of doing that, which were quite complicated, and I probably can't sum up in 30 seconds, but I think this is also going to be another big topic that we're going to be covering in the next year. I think that the switch to DC power, whether it's going to happen, it's been mooted a lot of times before in data centers. People who are watching this who know the industry, for some years will probably have heard this story before. But I think now, because of AI, because the power demands are becoming so insane, and NVIDIA are talking about 1 megawatt racks being a thing like not that long into the future, then there's something different's going to have to happen with power, and OCP is trying to develop some standards around that so that it's something that can work for people in the industry. So that was a really interesting theme, and I've written about it on the site, and I think it's worth keeping an eye out for in the next few months, because I think we're going to be doing quite a lot more about that.
Yeah, shameless promotion here of our power channel on DCD, but we're doing so much work on this topic right now. Stay tuned, because we've got lots of episodes coming out on direct current in the next few months, so do look out for that. Zach, I know you've been away for quite a lot of this month. You've been traveling Asia and all sorts. But from your side, can you talk us through what you're working on? We've had a lot of talk on your ratepayer piece. I know it's quite exciting for you. Can you talk us through what you've got coming up?
Yeah, sure. For my latest mag piece, which I believe will be published in the next couple of weeks, if not, you can send emails to Matt Gooding and ask why. I spoke to a range of political representatives and kind of utility companies in the US surrounding the issue of rate classes and data centers. I mean, I'm sure everyone's aware, with the massive amounts of kind of load coming onto the grid within the US market, there's been a real fear surrounding ratepayer prices going up just for regular customers, be it kind of industry, small businesses, or just the regular schmo on the street. And in response, a lot of state legislatures have introduced bills kind of proposing new rate classes for large load data centers, whereby they would have to cover the majority of the costs related to the generation and transmission infrastructure needed to serve them. So in my piece, I looked at 4 states, kind of looking at potential bills that have either been passed or proposed. So I went through initially starting with Ohio, which was the first state to approve a new rate class for large load data centers, where I spoke to AEP Ohio. And then I went through and I spoke to Matt, luckily enough, spoke to the new chief of energy in Virginia, who gave him a really interesting overview of how Virginia is approaching the problem. But the most interesting part for me, anyway, was speaking to a representative, Melanie Sachs from Maine, who proposed a moratorium in Maine for any new data center builds, which was really interesting given the fact that Maine doesn't really have a data center footprint. But the rationale behind her bill was...
Is there even data centers there in the first place?
No, but the rationale behind her bill was creating this 18-month moratorium so that they could kind of design wouldn't say the perfect, but a rate class that would allow them to be prepared for this potential load that could come onto the grid. Because as she told me, Maine is well suited for kind of data centers to come onto the grid in their service area. It's got ample land. It's quite a cool, temperate climate. And it's a really interesting story, because eventually, or ultimately, the moratorium was, it reached all the way up to the governor's office, but she subsequently vetoed it over issues over one specific data center project. I won't give the specific details about why it was vetoed. You can read my piece, a shameless plug, but it was very interesting. And we've seen a number of other states within the US propose similar moratoriums. So just looking down the line, especially in the next couple of years, it will be really captivating to see kind of how state legislatures influence kind of the growth of data centers across the US. And if we have an instance where some bring in really kind of harsh new rate classes surrounding data centers and others don't, whether we'll see data center growth in certain areas and it tapering off in other areas. So I hope everyone enjoys it.
Oh, okay. So huge implications there for build out, where people will go, where people will move to in North America concerning ratepayers. Interesting. When did you say that the magazine was coming out?
Matthew.
I think that's a question for Matt Gooding.
Matt Gooding, over to you. When's the magazine coming out? What can we expect?
I don't like to tie myself to a specific day in case I'm kind of problem occurs, but it should be out on Tuesday to coincide with the start of our DCD Connect Barley event. It is nearly finished. We are very happy with it. Zach's piece is excellent. I don't like to boost his already enormous ego, but it's really good, and I would recommend reading it. Also in the magazine, our cover feature this month has been written by Paul Lipscomb, our telecoms editor, who has appeared on this program before, I think. He's done a really great job speaking to people who work on cell towers, which is a really dangerous job. They climb these towers in all weathers, all conditions, and to fix them or put them up or, do maintenance on them. And they regularly get injured, and people often die. It's quite a serious story. These are people who are suffering like life-changing injuries or seeing colleagues die on these towers. And Paul's done a great job looking at the safety kind of aspects of being a cell tower engineer, how these people are protected, what can be done to better protect them. So he's got some great stories. It's not the cheeriest read, but it is a really good read, and I would recommend having a look at that when it comes out. We've got lots of other stuff. George has written about the implications of the war in the Middle East for the data center sector, which is obviously a big topic as well. And we've looked at the protests which continue to go on in the US and beyond, with a particular sort of spin on the kind of online data center activists that are popping up on TikTok and Instagram and things like this. We've got some interviews in there. We've got a look at space data centers and whether they're actually going to be a thing. Spoiler. Actually, no, I'm not going to be a spoiler.
We're waiting till the magazine comes out.
Yeah. But there's lots of good stuff in there. We're very excited to have a new edition out. It's looking really good, the mag, at the moment. We implemented a new design in the last issue, put together by Kat, our designer who joined the team recently. So all the pages are looking really smart. In fact, you've got the last issue just behind you in the background there, Tam, and we'll be replacing that soon, hopefully with an upcoming one. That'll be out next week, and you can check it out on the site. It's free to read. You just need to register, and look forward to hearing your comments about it.
Really exciting. Particularly that community engagement piece. Did you say it was TikTokers and activists?
Yeah, so Jason, one of our reporters, has really gone quite deep on the different types of people who are opposing data centers. This is going to be a 2-part series, and one of the first groups he looked at is sort of activists who are making videos or awful memes, basically, really not even very funny memes about data centers. So worth checking out for sure.
There is the beautiful irony of protesting data centers over the internet using AI. It's just chef's kiss.
Well, unfortunately, we have come to time. This has been a very quick overview of some of the things that we've discussed on the DCD channel. There's plenty more. Do check out all the articles and stay tuned for some of the articles that will be coming out. Matt, Georgia, Zach, thank you so much for joining me in the studio, and I look forward to seeing what's happening next month. Much appreciated.
Thank you, guys.